Pinecrest Meadows was a peaceful, exclusive neighborhood, with its immaculate streets lined by perfectly manicured lawns and modern villas. On a crisp Saturday morning, Claire Thompson stepped out onto her driveway, broom in hand, feeling the pride of being a new homeowner. At 42, Claire, a major in the U.S. Army, had finally transitioned into civilian life after 2 decades of overseas service. Buying this house wasn't just a purchase, it was a personal victory, symbolizing years of sacrifice, hard work, and unwavering dedication. Casually dressed in a blue t-shirt and sweatpants, her curly hair pulled back into a neat bun, Claire was determined to make her new home shine. The quiet of the morning was broken by the faint hum of a car engine. Claire glanced up, noticing a black and white police cruiser slowing as it neared her driveway. Her hand tightened slightly on the broom, her gaze narrowing as she saw 3 officers inside. Officer Ryan Miller, the driver, was the first to catch her attention. With a sharp jawline and a tall, broad-shouldered frame, he exuded authority. Even behind his sunglasses, his eyes narrowed as he studied her, his expression tinged with suspicion. "Take a look at this," he muttered to his partner, Officer David Brooks, who sat in the passenger seat. Brooks, a stocky man with a permanent smirk, glanced at Claire before letting out a chuckle. "Well, that's something you don't see every day." From the back seat, Officer Eric Carter, younger and less confident, leaned forward. "Maybe she works here," he suggested quietly. Miller's lips curved into a smirk as he brought the cruiser to a complete stop. "Only one way to find out," he said, as he and Brooks exited the vehicle. Carter hesitated, then reluctantly followed. They approached her driveway, their footsteps deliberate. Claire straightened up, her expression calm but resolute. "Good morning," Miller said, his tone more investigative than friendly. "What's going on here?" Claire raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. "I'm cleaning my driveway," she replied, her voice steady. "Your driveway?" Brooks repeated, incredulity lacing his voice. He turned to Miller. "She says it's her house." Miller crossed his arms, his sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. "Mind showing us some ID to clear things up?" Claire's expression hardened. "I don't need to show you anything," she said firmly. "This is my property, and I haven't done anything wrong." Brooks's smirk faded, and he took a step closer. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. How do we know you didn't just wander in here?" "That's ridiculous." Claire snapped back. "I moved in 3 days ago. No one's reported anything to me." Carter shifted uncomfortably, glancing between his colleagues. "Maybe we should just move on," he suggested, his voice low. But Miller ignored him, his tone sharp and demanding. "If this is really your house, you won't mind if we take a quick look inside." Claire's frustration bubbled beneath her calm exterior, but she stood her ground. "Unless you have a warrant, you're not stepping inside." Miller's demeanor darkened, his posture stiffening as he stepped closer. "You sure about that?" he asked. "We just want to confirm everything. No need to make this difficult." Claire's gaze never wavered. "I know my rights, officer. Unless you have legitimate cause, I suggest you leave." The tension in the air was thick, and Miller glanced at Brooks, giving him a subtle nod toward the house. "Go check it out." Brooks hesitated but then nodded, signaling for Carter to follow. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as they made their way to her front door. She forced herself to stay composed, her eyes still locked on Miller. "This isn't over," she said calmly, though her words were laced with underlying anger. Miller smirked, but there was a hesitation in his eyes as his colleagues disappeared into the house. Inside, Officers Brooks and Carter moved cautiously through the house, their boots echoing on the polished hardwood floors. The house was tastefully decorated, though several boxes remained unpacked. The space had a formal air to it, a testament to Claire's structured, disciplined lifestyle. Carter muttered under his breath, "Doesn't look like she just wandered in." Brooks shrugged. "Let's make sure. Check the back." Meanwhile, outside, Claire remained steadfast in front of Officer Miller, unshaken by his intimidating presence. Years of commanding soldiers in the field had taught her how to face aggression head-on without flinching. "You think I don't belong here?" Claire's voice was steady, though her gaze was cold. That much is clear. Miller chuckled dryly. You're reading too much into this. We're just doing our jobs. Claire's eyes narrowed, her voice firm. Your job doesn't involve harassing people in their own homes. Miller stepped closer, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. Watch your tone, lady. Cooperation goes a long way. Claire's calm demeanor finally cracked, her voice rising with a flash of anger. And so does respect. You don't have the right to treat me this way. Before Miller could respond, the radio clipped to his shoulder crackled to life. Miller, we've got something here. Brooks's voice came through loud and clear. Miller grabbed his radio. What is it? Inside, Brooks stood frozen in front of a large wall adorned with military plaques for him. Certificate and photographs. One image showed Claire in her army dress uniform, standing next to the city's mayor and police chief at an official ceremony. Brooks's face paled as he realized the gravity of their mistake. She's military. Brooks stammered, a major in the army, and she's connected Carter, who had been flipping through mail on a side table, froze. Oh no, he murmured. We're in serious trouble. Brooks nodded, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke into the radio. We need to pull back now. Outside, CLA watched Miller's expression shift as he processed Brooks's message. For a moment, his confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. What's the matter, officer? CLA asked, her voice cold. You look surprised. Miller ignored her, speaking into his radio. Get out here now. Moments later, Brooks and Carter emerged from the house, their faces pale. Brooks avoided CLA's gaze, while Carter looked as though he might apologize on the spot. Miller, Brooks began, his voice low. We should leave. Miller glared at him. Why? Brooks leaned in, whispering urgently. She's Major CLA Thompson, Army, and she's got ties to the mayor and the chief. Miller's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower his guard. So what? That doesn't mean it means. Claire interrupted, her tone icy. You've made a terrible mistake. Miller turned to face her, his anger boiling over. You think you're untouchable because of your rank? No, CLA replied, her voice steady. But I know my rights, and you violated them. Brooks and Carter exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort growing. Look, let's just go, Carter mumbled, but Miller wasn't ready to back down. Frustrated, he drew his gun, aiming it squarely at CLA. Sit down now. Now CLA froze, her heart pounding, but her years of military training kept her calm. She raised her hands slowly, pulling a gun on an unarmed homeowner. That's brave, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Carter stepped forward. Miller put it down, he urged, panic creeping into his tone. This is going too far. She's not in charge here. Miller snapped, his grip tightening on the weapon. No, but I am, CLA replied, cool, her eyes locking onto his. And you've already lost. Miller hesitated, his resolve faltering under her gaze. Before he could respond, Brooks reached out and placed a hand on his arm. Miller, enough. We need to leave now. Reluctantly, Miller lowered his weapon, though the anger in his eyes remained. CLA exhaled slowly, her pulse racing. She pointed toward the cruiser. Get off my property. Without another word, the three officers retreated to their vehicles. CLA stood motionless until the car disappeared down the street. Then she turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind her. Her hands trembled as she accessed her security footage. The entire encounter, every word, every gesture had been recorded. Claire saved the file and opened her phone. This is Major Claire Thompson, she said when the sheriff's office answered. I need to report an incident of police misconduct, she ended the call, her jaw set. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Claire Thompson strode into the sheriff's office, her posture firm and commanding. She wore her army service uniform, her decorations gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Conversations hushed as officers and staff turned to look at her. Claire ignored the stares and approached the front desk. I have an appointment with Sheriff Mark Hayes, she said, her voice calm but authoritative. The receptionist, a young woman who appeared slightly flustered, nodded. Quickly, yes, ma'am, the sheriff is
Expecting you. His office is down the
hall's second door, on the left, thank you. CLA replied, walking purposefully toward the indicated door inside the sheriff's office. Mark Hayes stood as Claire entered. A tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair. Hayes exuded a steady, experienced demeanor. His expression shifted from surprise to concern as he extended his hand. Major Thompson, it's an honor, he said. Please have a seat. CLA shook his hand but remained standing. Sheriff Hayes, I'm not here for pleasantries. I've brought evidence of a serious incident involving 3 of your officers. She placed a USB drive on his desk. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Go on. Claire explained, recounting the previous day's events in measured detail. She described how the officers had harassed her, entered her home without permission, and escalated the situation to the point where a gun was drawn. This drive contains the full security footage. CLA said it captures everything from the moment they arrived to the point they left my property. Hayes plugged the drive into his computer and together they watched the video. As the footage played, Hayes's expression grew darker, the condescension in the officer's tones, the unauthorized entry, and the moment Miller pointed his gun at CLA were all laid bare. When the video ended, Hay leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. This is unacceptable, he said. I can't believe this happened under my watch. It did, Claire replied bluntly, and I expect if this isn't addressed, I'll take this to higher authorities, including the media. Claire's voice was firm, her resolve unwavering. Sheriff Hayes nodded, his expression resolute. You don't have to, Major. I'll handle it. I'll start an internal investigation right away, and the officers involved will be suspended effective immediately. Claire's gaze was steady, unwavering. I'm holding you to that, Sheriff. This isn't just about me, it's about accountability. Hayes rose from his chair, his voice filled with sincerity. You have my word, Major Thompson. That afternoon, officers Ryan Miller, David Brooks, and Eric Carter were summoned to the precinct's Human Resources office. Each received a notice of immediate suspension, pending an investigation. Brooks took the suspension quietly, his gaze avoiding contact. Carter appeared troubled, nodding reluctantly as the HR manager explained the situation. Miller, however, was livid. This is ridiculous, he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. We were just doing our job. The HR manager remained calm, unshaken. Your actions were recorded, Officer Miller. You have the right to appeal, but based on the evidence, this is a serious matter. I recommend you consult legal counsel. Fuming, Miller stormed out of the office, muttering curses under his breath. Brooks and Carter followed, their expressions grim and solemn. 2 days later, Claire received a call from Sheriff Hayes. Major Thompson, his voice was measured. I wanted to inform you that the officers have been suspended and the investigation is underway. This will be thorough and transparent. Claire's voice was calm, but there was a firmness beneath her words. Thank you, Sheriff. I trust you'll follow through. But the story didn't end there. The incident had begun to spread like wildfire. CLA's security footage, shared by Hayes as part of his commitment to transparency, quickly went viral. Local media picked up the story, and soon it was a national conversation. Public outrage surged as the footage circulated online, sparking debates on police misconduct and racial profiling. Advocacy groups called for significant reforms, demanding stricter oversight and mandatory training for law enforcement officers. Meanwhile, Claire kept a low profile, declining most interview requests. Her focus remained not just on seeking justice for herself, but for all those who had faced similar abuse. One evening, as she watched the growing media coverage of the incident, her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. You've started something important. Keep going. Claire read the message and smiled faintly. She knew the fight was far from over, but she was more than ready for whatever came next. 2 weeks after the incident, Sheriff Mark Hayes held a press conference in the main hall of the Pinecrest County Police Department. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing relentlessly. Hayes stood at the podium, Claire Thompson by his side, her army uniform pristine and her demeanor unwavering. "Good afternoon," Hayes began, his voice steady and firm. "Today, we are addressing an incident that has brought national attention to this department. I want to assure the public that we are committed to full transparency and accountability." He then detailed the findings of the internal investigation. The security footage, combined with witness interviews, had confirmed multiple violations by the 3 officers involved. Officer Ryan Miller, who drew his weapon on Major Claire Thompson without justification, has been charged with criminal misconduct, including assault with a deadly weapon and abuse of power, Hayes announced. He was arrested this morning and is now in custody, awaiting trial. The room erupted into murmurs as the reporters reacted to the news. Hayes raised his hand, silencing the room before continuing. Officers David Brooks and Eric Carter, who unlawfully entered Major Thompson's home without a warrant, have been terminated from the force, he continued. They will also face legal action for their actions.